An excessive codpiece, a pair of improbable shoes, and an iconic metal bikini. Costumes are incredibly important in creating indelible characters. Here are a few controversial costumes that made it to the silver screen. Most versions of the X-Men character Emma Frost, from her original comic origins up through the online superhero shooter game Marvel Rivals in 2025, have leaned on her having a voluptuous figure that she enjoys showing off. Frost is typically styled with flamboyant, fluffy accents that riff on her ice powers worked into costumes that otherwise cover very little of her curvy body. So it's accurate to the character that actor January Jones spends a good deal of her time as Emma Frost in X-Men First Class walking around half-clothed. Maybe What Culture put it best when they included Jones's Emma Frost wardrobe on their list of worst superhero outfits and said, "This is definitely a rare case where being fairly comic accurate was actually a negative." Part of the problem is that the first-class version of Emma Frost doesn't have the fashion sense of the comic original. There's more than one scene in which Jones only wears a bra on top. Frost might traditionally love exhibiting her ample cleavage, but she typically does so with style and panache, not just standing around in her underwear looking bored. After building up his Hollywood cred with a string of well-received movies based on other people's source material, filmmaker Zack Snyder finally had the clout he needed to make his first movie based on a wholly original idea. That film was 2011's Sucker Punch, co-written with Steve Shibuya. Sucker Punch married Snyder's trademark highly stylized, green screen engineered, frequently slow-motion action set pieces with a story about a woman named Baby Doll, who may or may not be in a mental institution and may or may not also be part of a team of ass-kicking ladies who fight evil armies and fantastical monsters, and win. A lot has been written about how poorly the plot of Sucker Punch holds up to any scrutiny whatsoever. But hey, the movie wasn't marketed for its plot. It was teased as a bunch of hot girls in fetish gear punching, kicking, slashing, and shooting bad guys in dreamy fantasy realms. The fact that there couldn't just be an action movie starring women without them all being dressed in some of the most cliched male-gazy outfits ever seen outside of an anime or 90s video game was one of the biggest questions that Snyder faced upon release of Sucker Punch. Snyder took umbrage with accusations that he made a movie that exploited its female cast, and instead argued that Sucker Punch actually has a feminist message heavy on female empowerment. Either way, it remains Snyder's lowest-grossing theatrical film as a director, and only Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, scored worse with critics. In September 2016, audiences got their first look at Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, a new adventure inspired by 1995's Robin Williams-led adaptation of the children's book of the same name. In the photo, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Kevin Hart, and Jack Black are each wearing jungle-appropriate outfits, alongside co-star Karen Gillan, who's wearing what amounts to child-sized clothing. The photo brought immediate criticism, prompting Gillan to try and diffuse controversy by telling The Hollywood Reporter, "The payoff is worth it, I promise." It was later revealed that the first footage for the film really did explain Gillan's skimpy outfit. As THR recapped, the plot involves 4 high school students who are forced to clean out the basement of their school while in detention. They find an old video game and each chooses a character to play. Gillan's character is a shy girl who transforms into her adult character, and as viewers saw in the film's first trailer, the costume choice is a reflection of the way video games often portray women. Harley Quinn's big screen debut in David Ayer's Suicide Squad was one of the movie's biggest draws, especially since Margot Robbie was playing the famed villain. As with any other comic book character, a lot of media attention focused on her movie costume, particularly how little of it there was. Robbie shared her thoughts on the tight costume with the New York Times. As Margot, "No, I don't like wearing that. I'm eating burgers at lunchtime and then you go do a scene where you're hosed down and soaking wet in a white t-shirt. It's so clingy and you're self-conscious about it." Ayer stated he didn't think denim overalls would be appropriate for the character and insisted Robbie understood the character's iconography. He may have a point. Harley initially wore a jester suit in Batman the Animated Series, but over the years her wardrobe has changed significantly as the character went from being a jester to more of a sex symbol, who's now made her way into Hollywood, hot pants and all.
What?
Though audiences generally loved the dinosaur action and the guy carrying 2 margaritas as he ran from prehistoric monsters, there was one big problem with Jurassic World: Bryce Dallas Howard's heels. Howard played Claire, an uptight executive who ends up running around in everything from mud to wet concrete, and never for a moment takes off her nude pumps. Even when escaping a T-Rex, those heels stay glued to her feet. It's not hard to see why audiences had a problem. Heels would be the worst possible shoes to wear in that situation. The pumps must have been made of magic since they never came close to falling off in any of her off-road adventures. But Howard defended the choice to Yahoo News, saying, "I'm better equipped to run when I have shoes on my feet. I think she's somebody who could sprint a marathon in heels. For me, it was actually logical for her to be in that very illogical situation because she doesn't belong in the jungle, and yet she finds herself there and has to adapt." Whether or not you like the pumps, you have to be impressed by Howard's ability to run in them without breaking an ankle. The highly stylized world of 1997's The Fifth Element feels like it stepped straight out of a comic book. The Luc Besson-directed project is one of the most beloved sci-fi flicks out there, even if it wasn't always appreciated by critics. In the film, Milla Jovovich plays Lilu, a young woman who holds the key to the Fifth Element. Lilu's instantly recognizable revealing medical bandage outfit, as iconic as it is now, wasn't without controversy. Jovovich admitted that the costume made her feel a bit uneasy despite her prior modeling experience, and the crew staring and whistling at her on set didn't help matters. But in a 2022 interview with Vogue, Jovovich spoke highly of the Lilu character and actually defended the bodysuit, explaining, "Being in a hospital, they put a robe on you that is open in the back so they can reach in and put injections and tubes. So you have to have as little as possible, but for the sake of modesty, you have to cover up." In hindsight, apparently, there was a practical reason behind the costume design after all.
They are among us. We must know who they are, and above all, we must know what they can do.
In 2000, the first X-Men movie launched the superhero movie craze that shows no signs of slowing down. From the original X-Men film through 2019's X-Men Dark Phoenix, the series chronicled the adventures of the team of mutants while completely reimagining some characters, including Mystique. Mystique was played by Rebecca Romijn in the original trilogy, followed by Jennifer Lawrence, who played her in the 4 prequel films. And from day one, movie Mystique doffed her trademark white outfit from the Marvel comic books for, well, nothing at all. Yes, movie Mystique was always walking around naked. Despite her ability to shapeshift clothing at will, Mystique's au naturel costume design is pretty strange, given that everyone else in the cast is fully clothed. Romijn actually enjoyed her time as Mystique, including the non-outfit outfit, explaining to Looper, "Every single time they finished and I would look in the mirror, I would just look at it like it was a masterpiece." Lawrence apparently had the opposite experience. When she took over the role in X-Men First Class, the 8 hours a day required in the makeup chair almost drove her to quit. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, she admitted, "I love these movies, it's just the paint." By the time Lawrence reprised her role in Dark Phoenix, Mystique's makeup bore little resemblance to the original design. Apparently, after 4 films and countless hours in the makeup trailer, Lawrence had finally had enough. Sigourney Weaver's costume at the end of Alien has become controversial in recent years. By the end of the film, Weaver's character Ripley is the sole survivor of an alien incursion on the spaceship Nostromo. Believing that she's destroyed the creature, she prepares for hypersleep by stripping down and prepping her pod. But before she can put herself under, she realizes the fully grown xenomorph is most definitely not dead. For James Cameron, at least in hindsight, Ripley's striptease, as Weaver called it, stepped over the line. In an interview with the Chronicle about Aliens, Cameron insisted, "I made it my goal to make women interesting without making them sex objects, and I think I was pretty successful at doing that." On the other hand, Weaver told Express, "People have said, 'Oh, how could you demean yourself by doing a striptease?' And I said, 'Are you kidding? After 5 days of blood and guts and fear and sweat and urine, do you think Ripley wouldn't take off her clothes?" It's worth noting that the opening scene of Alien shows John Hurt's Kane waking up from hypersleep in his shorts, which makes Ripley's final moments kind of a callback to the beginning. Admittedly, Kane's underwear moment is significantly briefer, but that's mostly due to there not being an angry alien looking to hug his face off.
Wow. The Batman. Or is it just Batman?
In Batman Returns, the second installment of his Gothic Batman series, director Tim Burton brought in Michelle Pfeiffer to play one of Batman's most iconic adversaries, Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman. She stalks through the night in a skin-tight rubber bodysuit and matching hood with, of course, cat ears. While the costume seemed like it allowed for freedom of movement, that was far from the case. Pfeiffer told The Hollywood Reporter, "It was the most uncomfortable costume I've ever been in. They had to powder me down, help me inside, and then vacuum pack the suit. They'd paint it with a silicone-based finish to give it its trademark shine." Once the outfit was on, Pfeiffer was stuck with no way to use a restroom short of completely removing it, which, as she said, required outside help. And in addition to that obvious inconvenience, Pfeiffer said that wearing the thing made her feel like she was being crushed. Speaking with journalist Dominic Wells, she explained, "I'm talking painful. At first I couldn't walk, breathe, hear, or talk. Yes, the catsuit looked good, but it sounds less than perfect." Princess Leia's metal bikini struck an immediate chord with male fans of the Star Wars series from the moment it debuted in Return of the Jedi. But not everyone fell in love with the slave Leia outfit. In fact, many viewers found it to be a prime example of objectification and pretty poor treatment to the series' only notable female character at the time. Carrie Fisher, who played Leia and had to put up with decades of discussion around the outfit, warned newcomer Daisy Ridley during a discussion with Interview magazine, "Don't be a slave like I was. You keep fighting against that slave outfit." The costume's designers insisted they never intended the costume to be demeaning and based the design off Frank Francetta's artwork for the cover of A Princess of Mars. George Lucas loved the idea, and since he wanted something special for the scene, he got it. Fisher got extra attention while wearing the getup for more reasons than one. Since it was literally made of metal, the outfit wouldn't stay in place. Though Fisher may not have loved the outfit, she refused to be victimized by it. Decades later, she pointed out on Twitter that the character's brief time in captivity ends with her killing Jabba with her own chain. That chain only enslaved me until I could use the frabjous thing to kill that drooling, swollen super-tongue slug and whirl him off into infinity. You may have blocked it from your memory, but Ryan Reynolds played Deadpool before his solo outing in Deadpool. Unfortunately, during his first appearance as a character in X-Men Origins Wolverine, the filmmakers decided to make the brave choice of doing everything they could to insult the fans. They took away his suit, including his mask, and they sewed his mouth shut, leaving a character who's literally referred to as the Merc with a mouth, physically unable to speak. Even director Gavin Hood admitted Deadpool came out all wrong in his film, explaining it was hard to fit Deadpool's personality into a PG-13 movie. Studio ADI, who applied the creature effects for the film, made a video explaining their whole side of the Deadpool tale. The artist believed the studio didn't intend for Deadpool to be fully formed in Wolverine, just a setup for what he could become in a later film. One artist suggested, "If you think of this as an embryonic Deadpool, it might make more sense." From the comics to the screen, the DC superhero's attire has been the focus of attention numerous times over the years. So it's no surprise that from the second Gal Gadot signed on to play Wonder Woman in the DC Extended Universe, a number of comic readers immediately chimed in about how wrong she was. Her performance in Batman vs. Superman silenced many who claimed she was too thin and didn't have a hero's figure. The controversy didn't end there. The Amazonian's latest costume seemed fairly appropriate, though a lot of people were unhappy about the shoes. Wonder Woman has to run around and kick butt in heels, which many argued were unnecessary and put the emphasis on sexiness over strength. Though the heels might not be the most practical thing for a superhero, the rest of the movie costume was thoroughly thought out. Designer Michael Wilkinson spoke to The Hollywood Reporter about his ideas behind her signature look, saying, "We wanted to create something incredibly strong and portray her as a legitimate fighter. There was a lot of love that went into all the details, making her really look like a powerful, legitimate warrior." Judge Dredd is less than great for a number of reasons, one being a lot of screen time for Rob Schneider, and another being the ridiculous way Sylvester Stallone hollers. "I am the law!" But for longtime fans of the character, that wasn't the worst of it. In the comics, Judge Dredd famously never takes off his helmet, but Sylvester Stallone takes it off in under 20 minutes. Director Danny Cannon's original idea was to keep Dredd dark, violent, and NC-17. He wanted the film to stick closer to the comics and have an overall gritty tone. Stallone, on the other hand, wanted a flat-out comedy. According to Cannon, Stallone wanted countless rewrites and always pushed for more laughs. Plus, he had a less than reverent view of his character. Dredd, a role model? You've got to be kidding. This guy's a nut. In addition to making script changes, Stallone also wanted to say in the character's fashion. The movie's costumes were partially designed by Emma Porteous and Gianni Versace, as Stallone wanted the fashion designer's take. Apparently, Versace thought the future would run on cod pieces, since they were heavily featured in his original unused designs. Alan Grant, co-writer of the Dredd comics, said, "The story was subservient to Stallone, who I think takes himself too seriously." When Carl Urban was announced as the star of the 2012 Dredd reboot, he immediately assured fans he'd be leaving the helmet on. "I am the law." There are times when a movie's costumes aren't controversial at the time of release, but become so after the fact due to any number of circumstances. Such was the case with those trench coats worn by Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, and several of the movie's other protagonists in The Matrix. In 1999, when the film was first released, the coats were part of the movie's cool cyberpunk aesthetic. But a month later, something happened that put the idea of people in trench coats wielding guns in a much different light. The Matrix was first released to theaters nationwide on March 31, 1999. The massacre at Columbine High School happened just a few weeks later on April 20th. One of the most distinctive features of the two students who carried out the shooting were their trench coats, which definitely tainted that item of clothing for a time, including its prominent use in The Matrix. Suddenly, the scene where Neo and Trinity enter an office lobby wearing trench coats and proceed to shoot up the place and everyone in it felt more than a little uncomfortable. Film and television are historically terrible when it comes to depictions of Native Americans, but by 2013, Hollywood was making a conscious effort to do better.
Could be worse.
Worse. How could this be worse?
Then Disney's The Lone Ranger came along. Johnny Depp was right up front as the Lone Ranger's Native American sidekick, Tonto. But was Depp's version a modern Tonto who spoke more authentically than the original super stereotypical character did? Nope. And did the costume department steer clear of the full-on cliché Tonto with his face paint, buckskins, and feather in his hair? Once again, nope. The website Native Appropriations ran a scathing article about the whole fiasco titled "Johnny Depp as Cultural Appropriation Jack Sparrow." I mean Tonto, which tells you all you need to know about how well Depp's Tonto went over. And no, they weren't impressed with Depp's claim of Native American ancestry either. Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker in The Dark Knight was a tough act to follow, so it's easy to see why Jared Leto chose a different, completely off-the-wall take on the character for 2016's Suicide Squad. But Leto's version of the Joker was divisive from the moment the first images appeared. As for his performance, it was criticized by some for, interestingly enough, not being creepy enough. Leto's makeup and outfit had him looking more like a sleazy nightclub owner than a menacing supervillain. In a particularly scathing dig at the fit worn by Leto's Joker, Pajiba wrote, "He's dressed like a juggalo without the homemade charm." 1985's The Breakfast Club is about a group of kids who go out of their way to avoid each other until they're forced to spend a day together in detention. Over the course of that day, they all slowly open up to one another, eventually accepting each other as they are. That is, with the glaring exception of Ali Sheedy's character, Allison Reynolds.
You keep eating your hand, you're not going to be hungry for lunch.
Allison is the Breakfast Club's token weird girl. She's quiet and introverted. She wears dark colors, and she doesn't try to conform to society's expectations for a proper young lady. Soon, the other kids realize she's just a little quirky and doesn't want to be pretty in the traditional sense. The group's token jock, played by Emilio Estevez, even develops a crush on her. But rather than let a love story develop between Andrew and Allison as they both are, weirdo to weirdo, Allison is suddenly given a makeover. She's put in a frilly pink dress with a bow in her hair.
What happened to you?
She's the only Breakfast Club character who's asked to completely transform herself to fit in, a choice that has rightfully drawn a significant amount of backlash in the 40 years since the movie's release. For all the ways that Star Trek has been able to successfully predict the future, handheld devices, virtual worlds, computers who respond to spoken commands, and so on, some elements of the franchise quickly became dated, including the fashion. The original Enterprise crew wore uniforms that, while containing futuristic touches, were overall pretty characteristic of 60s fashion. The mini dresses worn by the female crew members were especially big offenders in that regard.
They're losing their pattern.
Oh no, they're forming.
The series ended in 1969, and it wouldn't be until 1979 that the franchise made the jump to the big screen with Star Trek the Motion Picture. Obviously, a 1960s vision of future fashion would have stuck out like a sore thumb by that point, so the Starfleet uniforms had to be completely rethought. It didn't go over well.
It's oatmeal-colored uniforms on a gunmetal-colored ship. Everyone's in a bad mood. Nothing really happens.
Fans thought the uniforms looked like pajamas, making it seem like the crew were lounging on a cruise ship rather than embarking on an intergalactic voyage. These uniforms didn't show up in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan or any subsequent sequels.
This is Constantine. John Constantine.
It's hard to imagine an announcement of Keanu Reeves being cast in anything being met with less than universal enthusiasm, but the news that he was to play the title character in 2005's Constantine didn't go over well with fans of the source material, who felt that Reeves looked nothing like the John Constantine they knew and loved. The fact that Reeves was American rather than British was another sore spot, especially since Reeves didn't even attempt a British accent. The comic book Constantine had blonde hair and dressed in a long brown and well-worn trench coat. Reeves' Constantine wore a sleeker, more Matrix-esque black coat, which further irritated the fan base. Director Francis Lawrence explained the reasoning behind the coat choice in a 2020 Comic-Con panel that looked back on the film.
We did try the sort of Constantine coat and ended up going with a black one. So we wanted to do what was sort of right for what we were doing.
Eventually, fans came around, and these days, Constantine is considered a cult classic. Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin is usually seen as a disaster.
$7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
Setting aside the cartoony elements, the terrible dialogue, and poor plot choices, fans will never forget the movie costumes, specifically the bat nipples. Schumacher explained in a behind-the-scenes special, "The inspiration for them are Greek statues that have perfect bodies, and so we're molding this perfect body in rubber and they're anatomically erotic. So it never occurred to me not to put nipples on the men's suits because I didn't know the male nipple was a controversial body part. That sounds reasonable enough, and if Batman and Robin had succeeded on many other levels, audiences might have been able to look past the costume distractions. Unfortunately, the movie sent the entire franchise into limbo for almost a decade, leaving fans with years to mock the worst misstep in the franchise's long cinematic history." An all-CGI Green Lantern? Original stills and trailers for the 2011 film look pretty awful, and although the studio insisted it would look amazing on screen, the animated costume has been widely held up as one of the many reasons for the film's failure. Star Ryan Reynolds later admitted to Screen Rant that he didn't care for the CGI ensemble, saying, "I mean, it's brutal doing a film where you're wearing a motion capture suit for the whole time. I didn't even get to see the Green Lantern suit until the first trailer. I never even knew what it looked like." The filmmakers wanted to do something new for a superhero, and costume designer Nyla Dixon came up with the idea that the suit was his power manifesting outside the body. An interesting idea, but the special effects just didn't hold up. Dixon agreed, as reported by Entertainment Weekly. "We were literally doing what you would sculpt in a studio, but we were doing it with a computer. In many respects, we were following all the same principles, but you never got the tangible result that you get from the build you do in a costume house." Much darker than his usual Muppet fare, Jim Henson's 1986 fantasy film Labyrinth is about a teenager named Sarah who gets sick of watching her baby half-brother Toby. When her little brother gets kidnapped, Sarah is whisked away to a magical land of goblins and other creatures. In this other realm, Sarah matches wits with Jareth the Goblin King, whose romantic interests in her are deeply off-putting. His overly tight trousers and prominent codpiece being in a children's movie is another issue altogether. Jareth is complex and charismatic, a sort of mythological rock star who's attractive and frightening. He's portrayed by real-life rock star David Bowie, who brought sex appeal and danger to the role. Costume designer Brian Froud played up all of that when creating the wardrobe for Jareth. He recounts this in the documentary Inside the Labyrinth. "He's contemporary with a leather jacket. It has armor on it. I gave him a swagger stick. It has a crystal ball, but if you look at it, it's a microphone. You're supposed to be a young girl's dream of a pop star." We got in a lot of trouble about maybe how tight his pants were, but that was deliberate. Because 70s and 80s rock stars wore tight pants on stage and in music videos, almost as an aggressive display of their sexuality, so did Jareth. Look, just because a costume is worn by an animated character doesn't mean it's any less capable of stirring up controversy, especially when that costume is a skin-tight dress with a slit all the way up the thigh that only just barely contains the wearer's extremely large chest. That animated femme fatale Jessica Rabbit and the dress in question were both found in a PG-rated movie that was heavily marketed to families and children, makes things all the more questionable.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
A lot about Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a bit too adult for children, to be sure. It can be argued that a PG-13 rating might have been more suitable, not only for how meticulously animated Jessica Rabbit's heaving bosom is, and the way she's prone to pressing it up against people, but for all the violence, terror, and dark themes of the film. But it's Jessica's figure and her outfit that really pushed the envelope, and they're the reason why the movie never got and never will get a sequel, according to director Robert Zemeckis. In an appearance on the Happy Sad Confused podcast, he explained, "There's a good script for a sequel at Disney, but here's the thing. The current Disney would never make Roger Rabbit today. They can't make a movie with Jessica in it." The iconic original dress only made one more appearance in the short Roller Coaster Rabbit. Ever since, from the 1993 short Trail Mix-Up all the way to a 2021 updating of the Roger Rabbit ride at Disneyland, Jessica Rabbit has worn outfits that either significantly reduce, if not outright eliminate, the exposure of her cleavage. Everyone's seen photos of Marilyn Monroe standing on a subway grate in a free-flowing white dress. The shot filmed for 1955's The 7-Year Itch was totally intentional, but the filmmakers didn't imagine it would cause such a stir. Costume designer William Travilla didn't think it would become his most memorable piece. He took care to craft an outfit that would convey Marilyn's sweet, innocent nature, while still letting her sexiness shine through. The dress was hand-pleated with metal boning and made in an ivory crepe. It didn't take a genius to discover that filming Monroe in public might generate some buzz for the 7-Year Itch, so they shot on a real New York street, invited 100 photographers, and let a crowd of over 2,000 watch the action. Photographer George Zimble was there and said the crowd went 50s wild every time Monroe's dress flew up.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway? Isn't it delicious?
The crowd loved Marilyn and she easily stole the picture, but one man was definitely not a fan of the stunt. Baseball star Joe DiMaggio, Monroe's husband at the time, unexpectedly arrived at the raucous set. After watching his wife get ogled and hollered at, he decided to leave. Zimble recounted the moment. They were very publicly leaving and everything stopped for their exit. There was a changed mood on the set and everyone could feel it. Apparently, Monroe and DiMaggio got into a terrible fight, and the next day on set, Monroe needed makeup to cover the bruises. Though the revealing dress wasn't the only problem in the marriage, it did seem to be the straw that broke the camel's back, as Monroe filed for divorce 3 weeks after the infamous scene.